right. Well, music to get us motivated and energized. Keep that energy up. I am delighted to welcome Craig Strong to the Channel One stage. Good morning, everyone. And we are really delighted to hear his talk on Discovery Kanban, human-centered design, and Kanban flight levels, innovation at scale. Craig, take it away.
Very much. Right. So, yes, indeed. So, this talk is going to be about, um, I'm a coach, I'm an Agile coach, and probably many of you also are Agile coaches. You may have been involved in Agile transformations, you may have seen Agile transformations, you may not have seen too many of them very successful. And I have also been seeing this. And I've been doing a lot of study, figuring out what has been going wrong. What can we do better? How can we get better results? And how can we achieve innovation at scale? So what I've done here is put together what I believe is a better approach and to show you that I'm actually, what's happening now, that I'm actually putting it into practice at a customer site. So I'm really excited to show it to you. It's still a work in progress. We're not complete. But then again, what Agile transformation is ever complete? so off we go. So I'll introduce myself a little bit, talk about the context of the company, what they're trying to do, and what's challenging about it. And then go a little bit more in depth into the transformation approach. What is this flight level business? Discovery Kanban and why exactly, the Kanban maturity level model, flight levels, and then talk about how it's going, what's happening, how is the transformation going, what are the coaching steps, and what have we gained so far, and then talk about what are the next steps, and of course the key takeaways, and we'll have a couple minutes for Q&A at the end. All right, so as I said, I'm an Agile coach. Started out very much hands-on, and over the years, as I got a chance to work with some federal agencies, as well as commercial companies here in New York, based in downtown. But it's been an interesting process of trying to solve ever larger problems. So, for example, right now, we are teaching 1,000 people in the Air Force about Agile, Scrum, and Kanban, and Jira. So I'm actually become a Jira trainer. Never expected that. Never know what life is going to throw at you. And then also, we're working with the Social Security Administration. They're trying to roll out Agile. They have a lot of legacy systems. And what they want us to do is go and assess how they're doing and what next steps they could take and how they could improve their use of Agile across the agency at Social Security. So interesting stuff. One of the cool things about, by the way, I recommend it. If anyone here has not had a chance to work with federal agencies, it really is something to work with these agencies, the missions they have, and the number of people's lives that they improve. It's pretty amazing. So definitely recommend that to anyone. So what's the context? Well, it's an online learning company. And you might say, oh, not another one. There's so many online learning companies now, right? Well, their mission is to help K through 8 students to love and excel at math. So it's all about STEM. And they have primary school lessons in production right now, and they're extending that. By the way, right now, almost 1/3 of all students, K through 5 students today are actually using their lessons. So they're kind of in stealth mode, but they're being used by a lot of kids, and they're extending now into elementary, secondary school grades. And it takes them a while to build a grade's worth of content. So they're producing roughly a new grade each year. So that's kind of their cadence right now. What makes them different? Well, extremely high quality lessons, really, really deep stuff. a vast amount of content. They're roughly, I think, 20 times the amount of content of the Khan Academy, just for comparison's sake. And Khan Academy has quite a lot. They're uncovering brand new ways to teach and to simplify complex concepts. So this is, some of the math stuff is not easy. So they're inventing these new things. So it's an innovation, it's constant innovation. What they're doing has never been done before. Basically, every single day they're doing something that's never been done before. And they're employing gamification and trying to make learning fun. And the point of it all is to create a growth mindset, right? We want kids, especially this company's product is especially used in underserved communities, a lot of places all across the country. And what they're doing is helping kids to understand, just because I don't know it today, I can learn this stuff and I can get really good at it. And so their mission is that every single child in America will say, you know what, I get this math stuff and I can be good at it. So, just a small mission, nothing major. So really cool stuff. So challenges and pain points. Why are we doing this? Why do they feel the need to transform? So there's a lot of items over specified. So by the time the developers get them, they have it fully worked out, like all these high quality hi-fi designs. And it's like, wait a minute, what problem are we trying to solve here? And it gets this fully specified thing. In other cases, they get a bare bones, thing with a lot of questions. So the analogy I use is sometimes they're getting a 7-course meal and they just wanted a sandwich. In other cases, they're getting like raw food. So how can we solve that problem? There's a lot of hidden work uncovered in the middle of development. So in the middle of stuff and suddenly, we got to do this whole nother thing. Part of that is just innate in the nature of what they're doing, because it's discovery. It's completely brand new stuff. But how can they make that better? Urgent items are cropping up. So then they sort of say, we've got to work on that. And then the stuff that was in progress kind of sits around, gets stale. Also, they're working on these lessons, right? These big missions. And what happens is they're almost done. They get to 90% complete. And there's a few little punch list items not left to be done. And they're already on the next one. So those punch lists, so they basically get to 90%. And it takes a long time to actually get something done. The delays can cause a ripple effect, since many different teams are involved. Like they have production shoots, they have video schedules, they have a lot of people doing a lot of different things. So it's much more than just Amazon.com. They have a lot of different teams all interacting. And then finally, leadership is being pulled into low-level decision-making. And what that does, it takes their time away from the strategy level thinking that they need to do. And it's also risking executive burnout. You've got people putting in 60 hours a week regularly. Like, that's not really sustainable. So definitely some challenges there. I imagine that many of these could apply to, many different companies out there. Some of them are a bit unique. So first thing I did was kind of put an Agile lens on this. And let's look at the pain points from the point of view of an Agile coach, and sort of where do they, do some affinity grouping and see where they fall. And so the 3 main categories that I came up with, and the first one was no Agile strategic portfolio management, and then no end-to-end management value streams, and then relatively few Agile interactions between the teams. And let me explain what I mean by that. So strategic portfolio management. Developers don't really know, like, where do these requirements come from? Are they just somebody's good idea? Is it something that we figured out in testing? Is it part of our strategy? And we talk to the board of directors, and this is something we got to do. So there's not really a sense of where did this come from? And we also don't know what this little thing we're working on, how does this tie to the overall strategy? How does this advance the overall strategy? They also don't really know, when a new defect comes in, how many things depend on this? Could this one defect cause a whole schedule to slip for production, for video production? And it's really hard to make trade-off analysis because they constantly have too many, a lot of things to work on. There's only so many hours in the day. So how do they make that trade-off? They need to be able to make that trade-off, and they don't have enough information to do that today. What about end-to-end management of the value streams? Well, we're talking end-to-end, right? So all the way from initial discovery and figuring out new things, all the way to in production. So a lot of times the developers are the last to learn, like, oh my God, we have this big problem. It's really slow, and or there's some stability issues. So we need to really tie that together, because we learn not only from the designers, we also learn from operations, right? Because that's a very important source of requirements in terms of the scaling and everything else. So we need to connect all the way from end to end. We can't just have our blinders on and say, I'm just a developer. I just go from when I get my user story to the acceptance of that user story. We need to think all the way to the delivering to the end client. Talked about some of the other ones here. The developers aren't really, their input isn't really getting fed into enough into the design decisions. It's like, oh, we could teach math this way or this way. A developer might say, well, we have something almost like this already. So if we did this, it could be a lot easier. And if we do this other thing, wow, that could take a long time to build. So we want to incorporate their feedback and their ideas. And what about the teams? Well, they try to have, of course, cross-functional teams. That's the mantra. We all try to do that. But especially in an environment like this, it's, you're not going to have videographers on a development team. It's just that it doesn't happen, right? So there's going to be coordination and dependencies between these teams. And in some cases, what's happening is the designers have already figured some stuff out, and that could be given to the developers early, but the developers aren't seeing that until everything's kind of baked. So they sort of lost some time that they could have been working in parallel. So these are sort of the challenges from a lens of sort of an agile coach, of how I look at the world. So what are the development teams doing today? Well, they're using Pivotal Tracker. Here it is in all its glory. They started with Scrum, but the sprints really aren't working well for them. They have a lot of unplanned work coming in. So in the middle of a sprint, there you go. And they have a lot of work that's at a specific date. And those dates may not coincide at all with the sprint dates. They're not like every 2 weeks at all. So it's very much, the sprint time box, it's not a natural fit for them. And they also have a lot of coordination with specialist teams, academics and video production, instructional designers, all kinds of stuff. So they're struggling with Scrum, at least right now. So what about the instructional designer teams? Well, they're using Asana. So right there, you've got two totally different teams. One team is speaking Russian, the other team is speaking Chinese. Like, how are they going to communicate? That could be a problem, you think? So they're largely date driven, and you can see they have a whole bunch of tasks to coordinate, and they have a lot of external stakeholders that they deal with. So there's some real challenges there. So what is the overall approach that I'm taking? So it starts with, so here's the big picture. The idea is the overall framework. The overall framework that I'm following is flight levels and Discovery Kanban. So I'll explain what flight levels is. Discovery Kanban is there's delivery Kanban, that's your sprint or your implementation team. Discovery Kanban is your upfront work. And that's the overall framework. How do we get there? Well, that's the systems thinking to approaching Kanban. It's implementing Kanban, so I'll talk about that briefly. And then once we put something in place, how do we evolve it? How do we get better over time? And what's guiding that is the Kanban maturity model. So that's a new thing You may or may not have heard of it. You can Google it. It's a really exciting new development within the Kanban community, and it's this a model that's very helpful. So let me dive into that. So, but before I do, I wanted to talk just for another moment about do's and don'ts. This is Craig's, personal philosophy. So, not this. Change the organizational structure immediately. No squads, no Spotify, no reorganizing people into Scrum teams. None of that. We're not disrupting day one. So that's not the approach. That's like the last thing we'll do, not the first thing. Not that we don't do it. It probably makes sense to reorganize. We probably need to reorganize, but we don't do that day one. We don't just focus on team level agile. This is in my opinion, a huge mistake. I'm seeing this happen at even really large companies. They hire 30 coaches coming in and they coach their agile teams, and then they don't really see good results. Why? Because they're only focusing on team level. What about the coordination level? What about the strategy level? They're ignoring those. And personally, I think that's a huge mistake. We don't start with the tool. In spite what the Air Force has asked us to do, teach them all Jira. We do what we're told, but if we have the chance, we should start with understanding the process first, and then figure out what tool can match that better. Of course, we do need a tool. We can't really use whiteboards if we're all at home, right? That's not exactly going to work. But we don't start with a tool. We don't scale too quickly. We gotta go, step by step. What we do is engage top management as active participants. They cannot be like, go be agile, do your agile thing. Here's a bunch of money, just do your thing. No, they need to actively participate. I know that's easier said than done, but the good news in this company, they're actually, in fact, they're more than active. They're actually really driving this. So it's kind of a really refreshing thing for me. So I understand that that's not always possible, but we do need to understand the context and the challenges and design a flight level architecture. So we want to know just the outlines to start with. What's happening at the strategic level? What's happening at the coordination level? What's happening at the team level? And connect those. It doesn't mean that it's top down. It doesn't mean that everything flows from the top, unlike some other frameworks that will remain nameless. It's basically just that there are 3 levels. They do exist. This is life, and we do need to represent that and understand that and see how they work together. So we'll implement a coordination level system. We'll connect it to the strategy level. We'll replicate this service by service. One of the things that Kanban does is it talks about each area as a service. We don't use the word product. We don't use the word project. We use the word service. And I like the word service because it's really general. You could be talking about the HR service. You could be talking about the accounting, finance service. You could be talking about a service that's producing a product. So it's a really general term, and it really allows you to use the same language across an entire company. You don't have to say, oh yeah, story points, and then senior manager's like, what the hell are those? Like, we like to have the same language, being able to use the same language across the entire company, and preferably language that business would understand. We want to start simple, and we've all, by the way, I have nothing against story points. I use them myself. It's just that the right thing in the right place. Start simple, evolve over time. So this is, I'm not going to go over this, is really complicated, but basically this is what I included in my proposal to the customer. So I wanted to show you, just give you a brief view of the kinds of things that we're talking about and how it all sort of fits together. This is a 6-month or year-long transformation plan. There's a lot of aspects to it, but so I wanted to show you that part. And of course, tool configuration is a part of that. You got to do that, but it's not the first thing we do. So, okay, Okay, doing well on time. So I want to talk just for a minute. What is this Kanban maturity model? Like, what is that? Like, you sort of understand, you probably understand what Kanban is, but you may not have heard of the maturity model. It is new. It is new. It's just, I don't know, a year or two old, and it's maturing fast. But the idea is, what we don't want to do is have a massive change. We don't want to come in and say, we're going to do a transformation to our company and we're going to change everything. And there are times you have to do that. If the company is about to go out of business, Steve Jobs, when Apple was close to bankruptcy, yeah, you do this, right? But most of the time you don't do this, because it's super risky, because basically, if we don't get to the benefits in time, the organization may panic and may go backwards. So basically, when that happens, all the coaches get fired, everything goes back to the way it was. And I'm sure most of us have probably seen that. We've probably seen that, been there, done that, and we don't ever want to do that again. So the way we avoid that is just making it small. We end up in a similar place probably, but we get there a step by step, a step at a time. And so each step still goes through the curve, but it's so small that even if you panic, even if it's like, uh-oh, didn't work, danger, Will Robinson, go back. You're only losing just a little bit, and you can resume. So that's the essence of the Kanban approach. But one thing we also have to understand is that, the outcomes that we seek, they will happen through practices, right? We're going to put in practices. Maybe we're doing scaled Agile, maybe we're doing large scale Scrum, whatever we're doing, there's practices there, right? So those practices will give us the outcomes, we hope. But the practices follow the culture. What do they say? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Somebody said that. And then the culture follows the values. Now, everyone says this. Everyone says, oh, we got to start with values. And I hear that a lot. But how do you make that actionable? Like, how do you say we're going to change values? Like, how do you do that? That sounds really wishy-washy. It sounds, it sounds like kind of not very helpful, right? Well, there are techniques, and I'd like to show you one, and it's called decision filters. And the idea is you engage with senior management and you tell them, yeah, because the culture has to lead. To change the culture, we must lead with values. So we lead with values. And a lot of times what you may find, or at least what I found, is that senior management has these values, but they don't always make every decision in alignment with their values. So some of the decisions, either at their level or at a lower level, may actually conflict with some of the values they espouse. So that's the problem. They may say, oh, we value transparency, but then something happens like, wait a minute, that's not transparency. So that's where decision filters come in. So you can make values actionable with decision filters. So you can say, if you're in a position to do something, just do it. So what does that mean? Don't wait for issues to be assigned. If somebody does something and later it turns out badly, we don't blame them. Oh, you shouldn't have done this. We say, thank you for taking initiative, and you do a blameless postmortem, right? So that takes discipline to do that, to tell people, hey, because the first reaction is like, why did you do that, you idiot? So, but we have to do that. So that's one of them. If you don't know who it's for, you shouldn't work on it. Question anything if we don't know who the customer is. Triage before commitment. I'm just going to go through some of these quickly. Understand customer expectation. Support decisions made by subordinates. I wanted to focus on that one. So even if you would have made a different decision, if you've delegated authority down and that person makes a decision, you don't change it, because the whole point is otherwise it's not true authority. So that's a tough one, and that's something that we're speaking to senior management about right now, because remember how I said they're overburdened, they're making a lot of decisions down here and they're working 55 hours a week. So what I'm talking to them, I'm saying, look guys, the only way to solve this is to delegate authority, and you're going to have to give up some control there. You're going to have to support these people, and they're not going to be able to make as smart decisions as you at first. But you have to allow that, and you have to, do that. Otherwise, you'll always be micromanaging. That's the only way. So it's a difficult thing, but that's where decision filters can help. And finally, if it doesn't fit our strategy, don't do it. So there's an infinite number of things we could do well, but we can't be effective unless we focus. So think about these decision filters. I found them to be a useful device, and you could see where you could make a whole bunch of them, and or not a bunch, but like 5 or 10 of them, and really discuss them with your senior leadership and say, hey guys, let's codify our values. Let's put our money where our mouth is. We say we value transparency. Well, you know what the implications of that are? This and this and this. And then when a decision happens that doesn't align with that, we immediately review it. You don't let it fester. You don't ignore it. You immediately review it. Say, okay, wait a minute. Why did we make this decision? So it's not an easy thing. It may lead to me getting fired, and that's okay. I'm okay with that. That's what happens when you're an agile coach, right? So driving evolutionary change, what's Kanban's approach to it? Basically, what you have to do is stress, but a little bit. You have to bring people out of the comfort zone and into the learning zone, but not into the panic zone. Bring them into the learning zone, make sure there's a reflection mechanism so they can see. And that's where the Kanban board comes in. That's where metrics come in, that kind of stuff. And then make sure there's leadership to lead by example and demonstrate desired behaviors. So we apply just enough stress to catalyze improvement. And here's the idea, is that you're at your equilibrium. You introduce 1 or 2 new practices, whether it's limiting WIP or doing pair programming or introducing test automation, or having a board where you can see where all the blockers are. That can be uncomfortable. That can be really uncomfortable. But you do just a little bit, and then it takes time. You can't rush this stuff. That's the problem, right? You have to take time, and eventually you get to the new equilibrium at a higher maturity level. And so this is, I know this is overwhelming, it's a lot, but basically what the Kanban maturity model does is it takes hundreds of Kanban practices, and not just Kanban, really agile practices. So it's taking all these agile practices and it's codifying them according to the level of maturity required to implement them. And the idea is it's just like a coach, or like a sports coach. So if you want to run the marathon and you hire a sports coach, on day 1, are they going to say, hey, guess what? We're going to run 20 miles today? Of course not. Of course not. They may have all kinds of drills for you, little tiny sprints and stretching exercise and all kinds of stuff. And then over time, you're going to do more challenging things. That's exactly what this is. What this is like a coaching playbook. And it gives you a whole bunch of plays, and it explains why they're at these different levels, so that what you don't want to do is pick something that's way beyond, and I've seen a lot of coaches doing this. They'll take something like a large scale Scrum or scaled Agile framework, and they take some of those practices in there require so much discipline. The organization may not be ready for that. So it doesn't mean that less or safe may not be successful. They may be, but it may take time to get there. So you have to allow the organization to mature to where it can do what they all want to do. And they want to do it, it just takes time. So that's where the maturity model helps put these things into perspective. So hopefully that explains. So I know I'm getting out of time here, so I'm going to speed up. Flight levels. What are flight levels? Well, the main thing is there's something missing from just team level Agile, right? We got these teams over here, and what's the problem? Well, even though the teams are delivering, maybe they're meeting their sprint goals every sprint, but overall delivery is still slow. Why is that? Because you've got, dependencies. Different teams may work at different rates. You might have a legacy team and they just can't keep up with this other team. And the problem is, let's say you have another team here that's using web technology and you've got a legacy team here. and you coach the web team and they get faster and faster and faster. What do you think is going to happen when they deliver these things at a more and more rapid pace to the legacy team? The legacy team is going to get further and further behind. So it reminds me of the I Love Lucy episode where she's eating the chocolates. She's trying to package the chocolates and then she's like overwhelmed. So that's what can happen with team level agile. So what is the solution? The solution is we have to look at things through 3 different lenses. Why? Because there are 3 different levels. Like it or not, they exist. And there are different considerations at each level. One of the things that the Scaled Agile framework did, you have to give them credit. You have to give them credit that they recognize this and they see. You can look at this safe picture. Now it's really complicated, but basically there's a team level, there's a value stream level, and there's a strategy level. So they do recognize that. They just put a whole lot of stuff in addition to that. So what's interesting about flight levels is you could almost think of it as the skeleton of SAFe. Does that mean it's compatible with SAFe? Maybe. So interesting thoughts. That's the subject of another talk. So, but anyway, so here's the team level. They could be Scrum teams, Kanban teams, less, SAFe, doesn't matter. We add the coordination level. So we've got these coordination boards and they're showing things at a higher level. Their job is to facilitate dependencies and coordination among teams. And so you have these coordination boards and you're constantly looking at them. You have daily stand-ups, or at least regular stand-ups in front of these coordination boards, just like you do with the team level boards, but they're looking at things at a higher level. So really, really important stuff. And then finally, you have strategy. So the strategy, and you see where you can link your strategy in this way to all the way down to execution. Now, does this mean that our strategy, everything has to come from strategy and the strategy controls everything? Not at all. Work can come into the system at any one of these levels. It's just that we have 3 lenses because there are three contexts. That's life. That's the way organizations work. So we need to recognize that and stop thinking about things only at the team level. It doesn't work. So I know I'm on my soapbox, but so this is the simplest, most straightforward framework that I've ever found that recognizes the complexity of life, but without a bunch of extra stuff. So I think it's the simplest thing that could possibly work, which is why I like it. So, all right, so what did we do? So I started with stakeholder interviews. Then we're designing the flight levels. We're doing a bunch of static workshops. And of course, we have to select a tool and do some prototyping. And then it's incremental adoption and incremental improvement. That's what it's all about. And that's how we get to innovation at scale. So here's some of the, how do you show a stakeholder interview? Well, of course, I'm doing everything over Zoom and Miro. So you can see here, I'm capturing some of the sources of dissatisfaction. Here, I did a hopes and fears workshop. Many of you may have done one of those where people say, here's what I hope, here's what I fear. I just put hopes there. Didn't want to put fears. But anyway, because I couldn't fit it all on the slide. But you can see there's a bunch of things that they're looking at. I won't read them all out. Y'all will have the slides later. So we did a bunch of stakeholder interviews to understand the context. Then the next thing is designing the overall strategy board. Now, why would I start with this? Why would I start with this? Why would I say I'm going to design? Is this like a grand design, like very, very complicated? No, not at all. When you're flying, intercontinental, can you see the ground? Barely. Like you can't really make out anything, right? You're at such a high level that you're just looking at things at a very high level. So it's not like it's incredibly complicated to model a flight level 3 board. Not at all. It's just different. It's just different. So it's not like I'm trying to model the whole organization in detail. All I'm trying to do is understand who are the players, what are the teams, and who do they have to talk to? Is it right? Of course not. Is it 80% right? Yeah, probably. It's probably about 80% right, and it's good enough to get started. So the idea is we design this overall thing, and seeing the big picture, it's amazing what it did. Like senior management, they saw this big picture and they were like, oh, yeah. And it was just, it was a really productive session. And we didn't spend time like going into the details of every one of these. No, it was at the flight level, it was at the strategy level. So it was really, really interesting. Big picture, teams in purple. You need to coordinate between teams, put a blue in there. So the blues will end up being the level 2 boards, the coordination boards. Are we absolutely certain that I got all the level 2 boards? Of course not. We're probably going to adjust that. That's fine. But we have something to get us started. And this only took half a day. This only took half a day. So strategy ties the value streams to the mission, the annual goals, and the OKR. So this is where we are today. Where is this going to end up? I wanted to show you real quick. So here's an example. You'd end up with strategies. So this is an example of a level 3 board. And I hope you can see that it's not ginormous, but it's very different from a team level board, totally different. It's like a portfolio board, right? So you've got your high level business functions, maybe a little bit of a roadmap, what's happening in the next year, quarter by quarter. Executives think in terms of quarters. That's how they think. So why would we tell them, no, you're wrong, don't think in terms of quarters? Like, that's ridiculous. Like, if that's the planning horizon they have, then we need to show that. And that's sort of why I like Kanban. Kanban's like, okay, customer, if that's how you think, let's show it. And maybe later they'll evolve and they'll see something different and they'll want to show something different. That's fine. In fact, that's wonderful. But we don't start by saying you're wrong, do it this way. Not at all. That would be silly. So this is an example of a board that some other coach did. I didn't do this, but just to show you. And basically, the idea is you want to tie these strategies to actual metrics so that people can really measure what's going on. And you can do this hypothesis-driven development where we're saying, okay, we thought that doing this would cause this and this to happen. Did they happen or not? And you can do that at the strategy level. It's very exciting stuff. So, okay, so then for the other ones, we're going to use STATIK. If you've been through a Kanban training class, this is, you know exactly what this is. It's basically the step-by-step process for creating a Kanban system for a service. So I won't go through it. I invite you to go get Kanban training. And the way I think about it is, let's say you're never going to use Kanban. Let's say you're in a Scrum team, you're happy, the Scrum team is working great, and you don't care about Kanban. I still recommend you learn about Kanban. Why? So in my 20s, I thought, oh man, I'm gonna buy a motorcycle. I was super excited to get a motorcycle, right? And so I took motorcycle training course, and it was really fun. It was like a 2-day, 3-day course. And I took that course. I never did end up buying a motorcycle, but I noticed something really interesting, that learning how to drive a motorcycle made me a better car driver because I was more aware. I was more, aware of my surroundings. So in my opinion, learning Kanban makes you a better scrummer. It's all good. It's all good. So anyway, off soapbox, but, and vice versa. If I was doing Kanban, I would want to learn Scrum. So extreme programming, all of that stuff. So you analyze your services one at a time, you design a Kanban system, and rinse and repeat. So here is an example where we're looking at flight level 2. We're looking at coordination, including Discovery Kanban. You see this part at the left? This is the discovery piece. This is where they really hadn't codified it. Like there was no board showing the steps that they were going through. And it can be harder to think about it because it's fuzzy, right? But there are steps, there is a flow there, and you can capture that. So basically, It's figuring out, identifying options, maybe figuring out some hypotheses, doing some testing, A/B testing, maybe doing a little bit of prototyping. All those things are steps in the discovery process. And once we do that, our job is to make sure that the implementation team gets the requirements that they need in a timely manner. So a lot of times what people don't realize is um, poor quality is often an upstream Kanban problem. So if we're seeing poor quality way at the end of implementation, it could well be that the problem is we're not getting high quality requirements because we don't have a discovery Kanban system in place. And a lot of Scrum teams are putting in place discovery Kanban for their backlog refinement. It works great. It's a beautiful combination. It's like it goes together so well. So anyway, this is an example, and here's what it will end up looking like, something like this. You got your upstream work, you got your downstream work, so you end up with an end-to-end value stream board. And this is what it looks like in practice. So I don't yet have the board in a Kanban tool because we're not there yet. This is still a work in progress. So maybe next year, if I come back to Agile Richmond, well, and hopefully in person, I'll show you how it actually turned out. That would be fun. So anyway, this is where we are today. And what are the next steps? We are going to select a tool. Now I want flexible board design. I need multi-level boards that connect to each other. I got the strategy level, value stream level, team level, and they need to be able to connect. I want colorful and informative tickets, of course. I want easy and actionable metrics. And I want to be able to facilitate coordination and collaboration. And one of the things that drives me nuts are these tools where only one person can be assigned to a ticket. Like, really? That's Agile? Only one person can be assigned? Why? That drives me nuts. So an ability to fix mistakes. So I hate these tools where, you can't go and fix anything. Oh, it drives me crazy. So I got to be able to fix stuff afterwards. Non-goal integration with source code control. I just don't care. I don't need to see every check-in that I've made. In Jira, I'm talking about you. Hey, I teach Jira. We do a lot of work with Jira, but to me, it's okay, it's fine, but it's just not fundamentally that important when you compare it to things like managing dependencies, coordination, all of that stuff. I think those are much more important problems to solve. So there we are. So what we have is our solutions to our original 3 problems that we identified. So the interactions between the teams, we have flight level 2 integration boards. We limit WIP at the integration level. So we have fewer things coming in at the integration level. And that's the beauty of having these 3 levels, is you can limit your WIP at each level. So you can get things done faster. So instead of putting into place 20 strategies, let's put into place 6 strategies. Maybe we can actually, get them done. So we have to limit our work in progress at each level. That's very, very important. And actually the most important is the highest level. That is the most important. The least important is the team level. Just still important, but we extend our integration board to cover workflow before and after development. And the strategic alignment, we have our portfolio level board that helps us plan and manage our activities. So this is kind of the essence of the solution that we're in the middle of implementing. And it's been several months, but once again, I'm doing an evolutionary approach. So I haven't transformed everything yet by design. It's slow and steady wins the race. So that's what we're doing. And so my assertions, most Agile transformations are not successful. Making Agile teams does not produce business agility. It's necessary but insufficient, is a better way to say it. Large changes are risky. Evolutionary change works better, unless you have to. If the house is burning down, then by all means, you know, let's do something drastic. But if the house is not burning down, we probably shouldn't do that. The flight level framework is very lightweight and yet comprehensive. It's really, really interesting. The maturity model provides a blueprint for successful evolutionary change. And oh, and I thought I'd show you some of the things, the trainings that my company provides. You know, some of it's kind of unusual, interesting, you know, flight levels, things like that. And with that, I would like to thank you very much, and maybe we have a few moments for questions.
All you can use your chat if you like, or just speak out. If you want to ask your question anonymously, just send it to me. That Robin Young, that would be, any of those are great. Craig, that was wonderful. I've got a bunch of notes.
This is lunchtime, so. Anyway, we'll have the slides, right? And the email is there, so.
I have a question. How long have Ariel and Craig been working with this client to get here?
Ah, okay. Yeah, it's been a couple months, 2 months so far, 3 months, I would say. But one of the challenges is it's remote. So it's sort of a day here, a day there. So it's early days still.
All right, lots of positive feedback coming your way.
They're about I want to say 100, 150, 200 person company. So still small, but growing like a rocket.
This guy is on a similar journey. All right, folks. Got another item in the chat, Craig. And yes, all of the presentations will be available. We will be editing the presentations after the conference and then making them available via the website. And as far as surveys on the conference, as well as each of the presentations, look, Braz will be sharing some information after lunch, and you'll see that information going out on the website shortly thereafter. All right. Well, Craig, I certainly want to thank you. This was a delightful and informative presentation. We're so happy that you returned. And everyone, what's up next is, of course, our lunch hour. Come back. I can tell you that in addition to providing some more information based on our keynote topic this morning, Braz and I are delighted to have a raffle. So you don't want to miss out on that. And then we will have our afternoon sessions, which are, the schedule is available via innovatevirginia.com. So I'm going to play us out if there are no other questions. Oh, wait a minute, I see one more. How do you measure whether an agile transformation was successful?
Exactly. Yeah, I just wanted to mention it because it's a really good point, and I didn't get to put it in there, but measuring the baseline, it's a really good catch. That should have been in the presentation, and I'm going to fix that. So measuring the baseline is really important. What are the existing lead times? You know, how long do things take today? And really, where the rubber meets the road, are we doing better tomorrow? You know, and so figuring out what to measure and what to baseline and before and after is super important. But basically, it's what the customer cares about. And in their case, it's how quickly can we get things done and how much predictability do we have? And so we're absolutely measuring before and after. And, you know, if I can't make things better, then I'm out of there. That's yeah, measurement.
Can't improve what we can't measure.
Effective, absolutely. Hey, good luck. Thank you. I need it. Indeed.
All right, anything else? Any other questions? Well, we all have Craig's information here. If anything else comes to mind, please shout out to him. You can always use our channels to pose questions, and we'll get those to him, and get a feedback back. So certainly, if something comes to mind later, don't hesitate to use the channels and send that information our way.
Thank you.
All right.